Hello and welcome to Flipping the Table's fourth episode in its 2026 Old Salt Festival series. Today, we hear Michael and Tay Lottie talk with Anna Claussen, founder of Voices for Rural Resilience, and Ash Hanson, CEO of the Department of Public Transformation. They are champions of creativity, initiative, and power within rural communities. They foster dialogues, projects, and actions that contribute to rural flourishing and remind all Americans that rural people are critical members of American culture and society in the movement to create a regenerative economy.
In 2024, the USDA's Economic Research Service reported that 74% of the nation's landmass is considered rural. But only 14% of the people live in rural areas. Rural residents are a minority. When you drive through the rural towns and villages of America, you can see that our modern economy is not serving these communities. The rundown buildings, potholed roads reveal degradation. Underlying poverty is confirmed by the fact that only 10% of U.S. GDP is generated in the places where 14% of us live. Yet, a couple of important realities are hidden by these surface conditions. First, substantial wealth is generated in rural places, but it is concentrated in very few hands. And a significant proportion of that generated wealth comes from taxpayer subsidies. In 2026, total taxpayer payments to agriculture are estimated to be $55 billion. 44 of that $55 billion will flow to only 185,000 farms, mostly to the largest soy, corn, and other commodity crop farms. And they make up only 10% of farms in our nation. But they capture 80% of subsidies and yet produce less than 60% of the national food supply. The average payment to these largest farms will be roughly $238,000 each. $238,000. What this means is that the remaining 1.7 million farms and ranches receive just 20% of our public investment in agriculture, which is only $6,500 on average per farm or ranch. Now, don't get me wrong. I do believe subsidies are needed if we want a domestic supply of affordable, healthy food. But we need to use subsidies to incentivize different outcomes in a much more equitable system. The current lack of fairness explains the rural poverty we see. Our national failure to equitably care for our rural lands and agrarian communities is a major factor that has threatened democracy and degraded our nation's overall health. We can change the current system if we more deeply understand the strengths and needs of our rural communities. And that is the focus of our conversation today with Anna Claussen and Ash Hanson, with whom we again met at the June Old Salt Festival on the Mannix Ranch in Montana. There is a vitality, a creativity, and a resilience in rural communities that needs much more attention. Tay Lottie from the Roots of Change team, who is directing our Vote for Your Food project, join me in this conversation about the often hidden riches in rural communities. This is important to us at Roots of Change because we believe one of the untapped pathways to fixing the public, economic, and ecological health and politics of our nation is by revitalizing a fair and rational reciprocity between urban and rural communities. It is a forgotten fact that urban and rural communities are interdependent. We need each other. Rural people need our markets, financing, tourism, and social support systems. And urban communities need food, timber, minerals, clean water, clean air, and vast places in which to recreate. And of course, we need the beauty in many forms that rural people make. So let's explore the heart of rural America in our conversation with Anna and Ash.
Enjoy the show as Michael kicks off the conversation with Anna Claussen.
We started last year with the same question. Why did you come back? Why did you come to this thing?
Well, first of all, it's pretty hard to stay away once you've experienced it, even after we experienced it in the snow and the rain.
Yeah, last year.
For me and for us, I think both. The intersection of bringing together rural folks, which we do here, with conversations about the changing landscape. First up, I'll say I'm with Voices for Rural Resilience, and our work spans boardrooms as well as barnyards, supply chain work, and then also wear the hat as co-hosts of Beyond the Clock, where we work with rural artists and culture work, our podcast.
And I get to join Anna on this journey and got to come back again this year. I am not in the agriculture industry. And
You're an artist, you're an actor.
I'm a theater artist. I'm a writer, director. But yes, I work with community members to write large-scale, site-specific musicals about small towns, and I've been doing that for over 15 years. And so a lot of our work is about narrative change. And I also run the Department of Public Transformation.
Which I love the name of that.
Thank
And
you.
I actually saw it online recently. I was like, wow.
Yeah, some people like it, some people don't like it, because they're like, what are you trying to transform? We're trying to transform our culture? Did we say we wanted our culture transformed? And my question back is always, well, are all of your systems working for everybody in your community currently? And if the answer is yes, I'm like, great, you found utopia. But if the answer is no, which most people say no, then you're like, okay, great. Well, let's start with that. Let's start to look at where we could transform these things. But I came back because of the relationships, the community that I found here, and to learn. A lot of I am from rural northern Minnesota, but I'm on the side of like the fisher, hunter, trapper side, and not in the agriculture side of ruralness. And so I am constantly blown away by the care and stewardship of place that is shown in the ranching, and especially the regenerative ranching community. So every time that I get to hang out with Anna in her field, I learned so much about how to do our work better at Department of Public Transformation, and kind of helping to support rural arts and future workers in their places, working with ranchers and farmers. Now I'm learning too things like producers and processors, and what the role of artists could be in helping to raise the story of what's really happening in our land and changing landscape.
This is good. So, Anna, you should just give people a little bit of background about where you came from.
Absolutely. It's always a part of my identity. And I come from Minnesota. I come from a family farm in Minnesota, but I've also been an urban resident for 20 years in Minneapolis. And I think, back to
And that can be hard sometimes. And
Yes.
it can be really hard.
there's a lot of tension in being a bridge.
I think the really short answer also to your first question, why are we here? Because this space is full of bridge sitters.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't get to build bridges unless you're actually sitting on the bridge. So I come...
And dangerous.
And
You can
dangerous.
fall.
That's
You
true.
sure can. Yeah. And it takes constant effort to maintain yourself. Every conversation at the Wine Talk Lounge, every beautiful side conversation, people are focused on relationships. And for us, for Ash and I too, in our work, a lot of times it's just reminding ourselves and each other that this is the work.
That's why I really love this.
But the relationship is the work.
In the relationship is the work. This is our taxpayer dollars at work to make our systems work better for farmers and ranchers. And, we want to continue to move that way, not just on the national level, but then thinking about on the local level. I asked Tay yesterday, are they an organizer? And when she said, I'm in communications. And so my response was, that's important. That's even more important. It is, because you need a good story. You need to be able to get people, and you need to invite in to tell their story. So I think, what Anna was saying, like the relational approach to the growing grass work, this change work, old salts work, is how we are going to, it's the only way we're going to change parts in life. We got to listen to Mary Yeri Wendell-Berry's daughter today talk a lot about this and this, how it has to be local. If you start to do something beyond what you can see, like they'll get really frustrated. But the more local you work, the more you're able to watch over time those changes happen.
That's what's so great about being here at Old Salt, is that you're surrounded by people who are working on the hyper-local for that kind of change. That does then ripple out to their community, their state, to this country for the kind of change that we're wanting to see.
It reminds me of the tagline of this event, Land is Kin. That's about relationship, going back to this kind of theme we're on right now. It's about relationship, and basically every talk that I've heard, and almost even in the last conversation we had with someone who works really in capital, using capital, deploying capital to companies, he was talking about the relationship between the consumer and the company, that's really what the regenerative companies are about, trust between the person who's buying that food and the producer. So that's relationship.
Yeah, it is relationship.
Yeah, and I think like one thing to build off of what you're speaking to there, Ash, and what both of you may have an interesting perspective coming from rural communities. And when we've been thinking about this broader Vote for Your Food campaign and what we're doing to bridge urban and rural perspectives, interests, and needs in the food system, I think that a lot of the times it's difficult to understand what each of those different experiences are. Like the need of a thriving rural economy so that we can have a healthy urban market and vice versa. And I'd love to hear from both of your perspectives, what is one things that is misunderstood in a rural experience that you would love to reframe or like shape a new narrative around?
I think that we talk a lot about different cultures, but we don't talk about rural culture. Each rural place does have its own culture, and we do need to honor rural culture in a similar way that we would honor, cultural heritage of many other kinds of cultures that we identify or subcultures that we identify across the U.S. And so, like, rural America is not a monolith, is not one kind of culture. Right. But here we are in the American West and seeing a lot of people really embracing the ideas of rural culture. And now you could blanket that with a political landscape, and you could just say rural culture equals conservative. And I'm not so I'm not conservative, so I'm not going to like rural. And that is so unnuanced, and it's so frustrating for those of us doing this kind of work when you even just like take a minute to go one step deeper and being like, okay, what are the values that show up in rural culture? And they are around this: we take care of each other. We do take care of our land, and we do take care of our communities as best we can, and yet we are extremely under-resourced. And so we are doing a lot more with less. And it makes me, and I know a lot of our colleagues and friends in rural communities, really frustrated that we get put upon, I think, by a lot of urban audiences, especially urban liberal audiences, as a problem. Mm-hmm. And rather than just like taking a little bit to understand the cultural context of ruralness and how we got to where we have gotten to in this country with decades and generations of disinvestment and extraction, that it's all of us that did that. We allowed that to happen. These systems are working exactly as they were designed to work, as Mary Berry said, and we need to change those systems. But in order to do that, part of it is for us to see ourselves as one civic body in this country and stop putting these divides around something that to me is so hilarious, which is just how many people live in your zip code. That's it, you know? And it's like, why does that divide us so hard? I mean, I find it quite ridiculous. But it also does. It really does. There is a difference there. And so then you have to like lean in and try to understand a little bit more about what is rural culture and what is the specific culture of this place. And that is something I feel like the media misses. I feel like that's something that, this idea that there is a one rural America kind of washes away this more nuanced view of what it means to have values that are born out of being from a rural place.
But I agree with what you're saying, but I also see that when I look at the map, we talked about this last time.
Yeah.
When you look at the map at the end of a national election, what do you see? You see two different worlds.
It depends on what map you're looking at. Because if you just look at the red and the blue, but if you look at ones that are more shaded of purples, and if you're looking at ones that are more nuanced.
Right. You see but again, I mean, I just was looking at one because we've had all these elections. And yeah, the liberal votes are near the cities in the most rural states.
Yeah.
But see, I think that's because people aren't really even thinking about the nuance of their parties. They're just voting with their tribes. They don't spend that much time thinking about it because they know it's polarized.
Right. Or they've lost a lot of trust or faith in,
Right.
in politicians.
Right.
Are you also comparing that with how many people are actually showing up to the polls in these places?
That's another very important point.
Yeah, and when we're talking about only 20% of the people living in these rural places, how many humans are you actually talking about in
Right.
some of these counties?
Right.
So, again, if you want to talk about the Electoral College, we can talk about the Electoral
No,
College.
I'm just, what I'm
the
trying to do
numbers
is
don't-
not
yeah.
deny.
You're right.
There are differences.
There are differences politically.
That's right. And so the question is, I'm really curious about how you get over that polarization. And I think that's the work that you guys do is you have to get beyond the tribes and you have to get to the people.
Well, 100%. But your question of what do you see when you look at that map? That's what I see. It's just a map. It's not the people and the place and the culture. And when you're in a place like we are here, it's a feeling. In Voices for Rural Resilience in my organization, I mean, we really leaned into creative facilitation, storytelling, strategic thinking for rural communities that makes sure that we prioritize feeling as a legitimate way of knowing. And as soon as you know it when you're in relationship or you go to a place and you're like, I'm not talking politics with these people, and we probably have different politics, but it's not what is guiding any of the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I'm sure there's a wide range of liberal and conservative views among the 5,000 people here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And is anybody toting that?
No.
No. It's just humans who care about
Right.
this place, or humans that care about ranching, or humans that care about
Good
an
food.
identity and culture.
Right.
And I think we don't have as many opportunities this is again why this place is so special. These kinds of gatherings that are not about polarizing us, but they are about finding our common ground, are fewer and further between. And I think that is especially true in rural places where a lot of gathering places have been in decline. A lot of our work at Department of Public Transformation is about resourcing, actually getting money to people who are starting gathering spaces in their communities, and to get resources, actual financial resources to artists and cultural workers who are doing the work of bringing people together, like Mannixes.
See, that's exciting to me to think about that. The question I would have is, for instance, I get to a lot of rural communities, and as you were saying, in rural communities you have a spread between people who are more the creative types, the artistic types, and then other people who are making their livings or spend most of their time working in the land in some way. And often their politics are different. Their politics are different. They care about their place in very similar ways, but their politics are different. So I'm interested in how you bring those two worlds together in a rural community.
I have thoughts, and it actually it's around my frustration too. One of the biggest frustrations. We don't give enough space and enough of an invitation for people to be their whole selves. When you said there'll be artists, there'll be people working as cultural workers, artists, and then there'll be ranchers and the people driven by the economy. Most people embody all of that within themselves in rural communities. And an invitation to actually, in rural places, you have to show up wearing a lot of hats.
Yeah.
And it's
That's true.
an entirely whole body engagement, a whole person engagement, which is why I also find this connection to the Growing Grass Project, which is trying to have full animal use, and where is that value? But valuing people for the fact that they can show up and have a lot of different complex identities. And in rural places, people do. One of the other frustrations that we both, I know, share is when we talk about that we bring together and bridge a network of rural artists and rural cultural workers, and people think, there must just be a few of them. Rural artists and cultural workers are not scarce. What they are is they're tired because they don't get to rest.
Right.
I mean, in order to maintain and nurture relationships in community, when tensions and polarizing things, you don't get to walk away from it. And it's also not often recognized by outside institutions. It's individuals, it's hard to see, where would I invest in people doing this in place? And the third piece is people in rural places are very humble often. There's a lot of humility about that it's a role or that it's a job. People just do it. And so it goes unseen.
Can you give me an example? I think I know exactly what you're saying, but for the audience, give us an example of what you, like a specific kind of person that what their experience would be that would describe that. You mean they work all day on the farm and then they have to go and work, they're a volunteer fire person or EM2?
Let's just look at right here. Cole Mannix
Right.
hosting hundreds, thousands of people here.
5,000 people.
Yeah, we just lost power.
Right. He ran
The
off and got
generator, and he ran off and came back, and he's
Right.
the one bringing the fuel.
Right.
And for the audience, Cole Mannix is the founder of Old
Old
Salt
Salt.
And this is their
Co-op,
family ranch.
and is part of the Mannix Family Ranch.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
But-
true. I mean, all the people here that work in this, that are volunteering, the EMTs, people
Yes.
serving, they're all
Yes.
volunteers who come from the ranches around here.
Yeah.
And they're
why
making
it's
this
second nature.
experience for 5,000 people.
That's right. Yeah.
I think that civic engagement across this country is declining, and it's like, well, how are we defining civic engagement? Is it just around voting, or is it around neighboring? Is it around volunteering?
Neighboring.
Is it around showing up?
I like that word, neighboring.
Yeah, and I think like what we're seeing here with all of the local food vendors and folks that are volunteering their time and energy and talent, their extreme talent, maybe this is their thing that they invest in. That they invest their time and energy into Old Salt every year. And we need to celebrate the hell out of that and be like, this is part of your civic engagement because you are, tending to this very delicate act of weaving social fabric back together. And we don't call it essential infrastructure like we do roads or fire, folks taking care of us if there's a fire. Or emergency services, but this is essential infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
Old Salt is, and I think our leaders need to really be thinking about how we're investing in events like this, in people who are doing cultural work as a part of our essential democratic and civic life.
That's an interesting idea. Like, could there be a way for, people here in Montana might not want government to invest in something like this because they don't think that's government's role, but they might think that, and foundations might think that.
And investors should be thinking
Yeah,
about that
well,
too.
actually, if you look at the list of sponsors of this event, there's a lot of family, foundations, businesses, and
They see the value in this.
yeah, so they are investing in it. And the USDA and our NRCS invested in this.
Well, let's talk about vote for your food, because
Okay, yeah.
in Minnesota and California,
Right.
in Minnesota, we have the Land Legacy Amendment, which is a taxed voter tax base that contributes and does support our rural arts and culture field.
Oh, you do?
You know,
Wow.
and-
Times 7 to the next state. So about $7 per person in the state of Minnesota goes to something called the Legacy Amendment Fund. And that gets redistributed to artists, cultural organizations, museums, libraries, and land. And so,
Preservation, conservation.
artists and conservationists linked together to make this
That's
happen.
really neat. I've never heard of that before.
Oh,
We
yeah.
don't have that.
Well, and do you know more about, you've been engaged in California in the art scene too, and what's underfoot there?
But we don't do that, do
No,
we?
not to this degree. And there's been a movement with California for the Arts to try to figure out how to make something like this happen.
That
as well.
sounds good to me. I mean, we do a lot around land conservation.
Right,
We have
yeah.
the Sustainable Ag Land Conservation Program. Sonoma County, we pay a 1/4 sales tax and generate $25 million a year to protect land.
Yeah.
Just in our county. But, I like this idea of linking land and art and culture. That's
That's
a
what's
very
happening
cool
right
idea.
here. Land is kin. I mean, that's how
Yeah.
we're doing it. Storytelling and music and
You
food.
still need this glue. I talk about this with our Growing Grass project. It's vital and important when you are asking a producer, a rancher, a farmer to transition their practice to financially support them, to de-risk that
Right.
challenge. But you can pay a producer and still not value them.
Yes.
And there is something there you still, and the exchange of value is human-centered. It's showing up together, hearing someone's story, hearing their hardships, paying witness from producer to consumer. And of course, you can't touch every aspect of the food that's on your plate. People are like, that's exhausting. Am I supposed to know my
Right.
potato farmer? But
Right.
just one meaningful relationship can reframe, as a consumer, as an eater, how you think about your connection to your producer, to the farm, to the ranch, to the land.
Well, that's a good bridge back into the whole idea of our campaign. And Anna, we reached out to you early on to talk about it because through Grass, we got to know you and I got to see how you facilitated meetings. And I'm very curious about this idea of, you guys do a lot within rural communities. I'd like to hear from both of you about what you imagine is possible of, let's talk about here. Or let's talk about Minnesota, or a place where you bring I think it's better to bring urban people to the rural land because that's the disconnection mostly. We need to get more people from urban centers to get on rural land. So let's talk about a scenario. What happens when you bring, let's say you bring 25 to 50 people from Minneapolis out to your family's farm and trying to have a conversation with 50 people from that community, that rural community. What are we going to talk about? How are we going to do that?
Well, I want to answer that question and go beyond that. In fact, my father had an invitation for this fall, and he's bringing out 50 people from the Farm Credit Service, which he's on the board of. And he just told me, they sent the sign up around to all the staff, and in 2 hours it was full. The bus was full, 50 people, like absolutely. I want an invitation.
Came from the city.
Coming from the city, coming from cities, metro areas, many of them. And so the invitation is so important. It's far more important than what you're going to talk about. It's to be together and know, and the same for who's hosting. You can start to get anxious, like, well, what do I want to show them? What do I not want to show them? Because people are ready to go, well, I had an assumption already of what this farm or ranch was like. And so first, we have to, it takes a lot of vulnerability and trust. But if you create the container where people realize here's sort of the bounds, here's what we're here to do. We're here to connect, we're here to listen and talk and see and ask questions. It's not, let me stand up and tell you, like, ask me what you're curious about. We've lost curiosity, or we've lost spaces to practice curiosity. But I also want to say,
but talk to me more about I want to hear more specifically, like, what is the invitation? Give me an example of an invitation.
So there's an incredible organization, the Kentucky Rural Urban Exchange, where they're doing this work, all across the state of Kentucky, and they have been doing it for a decade. And the invitation is Is that
Dee Davis?
No, it's
No.
Savannah Barrett,
Okay.
and Art of the Rural, and then a whole host of committee members from across Kentucky that make that happen. Apple Shop's a big part of it as well. And the invitation is, do you want to know more about urban or rural spaces? Then apply. So then you're getting people who actually have that curiosity. And a lot of their work, they go to the urban places and they go to the rural places as a cohort, but a lot of that work is just about building relationships. And so you sit in a circle and you tell stories about your childhood, and you recognize where our wounds are as a people. You recognize that you are, in this case, as Savannah always puts it, like, you are Kentuckian. It's not about urban and rural. Like, we have a lot of similar
I like that.
ideas around it, and we can, what other identity can we lean into that is common outside of our geography?
That's an interesting idea. I like that.
And in Minnesota, when we were able to pilot that exchange too, and Ash and I were both involved in that, the other piece I was going to bring up, we all have most all of us have a complex rural urban identity. So even if you can't leave, and we can't facilitate you leaving your city to go to a ranch for a weekend or go to a small town, creating space for people to talk about their rural roots, their connections to rural places in the land, and realizing that identity can be part of your current identity. We often think they are one or the other. You are rural or urban, because with that we put a whole bunch of associations.
Well,
that go with it.
but I think you have to be a little careful about that, because I just spent 6 months living in New York City, and there are a lot of people in New York City who have never been outside the city.
That's true.
Sure.
And there are 12 million people there, or whatever it is, millions of people anyway. So, there are examples of people who've never left the country.
Well, but I'm talking, we're from generations. Like, where do you remember stories of your grandparents? Because there are ways that we have to think beyond our generation.
Okay,
when
I see
you
what you're
think
saying
about
now.
your identity.
Yeah.
Where do you come
For
from?
a lot of black people, that can be very heavy.
It's very heavy. And
Yeah.
that's
And
why
for
a lot of people
it can
don't,
be
a
very
lot
Yeah,
of people.
yeah. I
We're all
mean,
in
my
generational
great-grandfather, they lived in poverty in Northern California, and
Yeah.
so there was,
We-
there was a lot
we
of poverty
moved for
associated with rural
reasons.
land in the past and in the current situation.
Yeah, which
By
and
design.
I think that point also comes back to, so, like, zooming out, why does this even matter? Like, why does it matter that we're bringing the perspective of rural life to this broader platform and a broader audience? And a lot of it has to do with just making visible where that under-resourcing is that Ash, you spoke to at the bottom and at the beginning of this. And I think that maybe as we're shifting towards the end of the conversation, knowing that both of you two play really beautiful roles as facilitators and culture creators in the way that you're bringing stories about to different communities and in different places, I'd love to hear a few specific examples from the work that both of you two have done. Which one comes to mind for me, Anna, the first time that we ever got to speak, you shared a really impactful story about how you gathered a community in a rural place to understand how their lack of electricity was impacting them and how you were able to actually bring those stories to legislation and to a broader platform that actually impacted change. So if you both have like a story to share there, I think that could be a
good idea. I like
example.
that.
Yeah, well, I'll go back to that one because it was so impactful. And you're referencing some work 8, 9, 10 years ago that was very powerful and important for me called the Rural Climate Dialogues. And it was rooted in, in short, it was rooted in a response around climate action and climate change at a state level in Minnesota that was coming from the state agencies, the metro area, saying we just can't message rural people right. We haven't got the message right to get them on board. And when
board in what way?
On board with climate state policies
Okay.
that were trying to be voted and moved forward. And then the reality is, number one, we hadn't heard rural people's concerns. And what you're referring to is, to abbreviate it, what they were proposing, which was around energy and a tax on energy, was going to cause rural Minnesotans 30% more. They spend 30% more on their energy per their income than people in the city. And when we brought people together to tell the story of what that looks like, I mean, that looked like a young mother knowing to the date about the third week of every month when they run out of fuel to heat their home in the winter. And so they pretend that they're tent camping so that her son didn't realize that they didn't have
energy.
They didn't have access to that. And that's hard to own that story. Yeah. And it's even harder to share that because it's hard. But when we were able to nurture, as I feel like you beautifully said, like what it is to be from a place and to speak about your story in order for change to happen, and this family and other people who were part of this were able to speak and tell their story to state agencies, it made such a huge difference because we humanized each other and it changed what we were putting forward as a state for policy. And what I'll just say about that is I think for both Ash and I, we really care a lot about the fact that what we tell ourselves about where we're from and who we are is important. It's as important as the policies we write for our places. And we often need to remind each other that and empower each other that your story is valuable, as valuable as anybody else's story.
Yeah. And what was the impact of that work?
Well, the impact of that was this happened in multiple counties. And in order for them to bring together these across Minnesota from very different parts of the region, to realize that this policy had impact very different in northern Minnesota as it did in southern Minnesota, and to shift the policy that passed, that we weren't just going to try to vote up or down a policy, we were going to change it.
So they changed it.
Yeah,
right.
They changed it.
Earlier, yeah.
But the bigger piece too is that right now I think we're just struggling with an inability for people to feel heard, and you can't hear others if you don't feel heard.
Yeah.
And so other people want to say, what's the big impact? I am most care about the impact of a dozen people who finally felt seen.
Right. And I mean, that at the end of the day is what makes the work that you two do relational, even when it's on that huge scale, because then you can go back to that mom and say, thank you for sharing your story. This is the impact it had.
And it has ripple effects, and I don't have to know all of them, but I know that they carry on.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be something that you can always track.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
And I'll share one example from our work. We launched something called the Rural Civic Arts Partnership back in 2022, 2023. We were working with 3 rural Minnesota communities to try this idea of what it would look like to work with city leaders, elected officials, community champions, somebody who is a non-arts partner, and then an artist. They had to have 3 people on a core team, at least. A lot of them had more, to go on a 6-month learning journey to figure out how they could work more closely with the artists in their community to address some challenge or opportunity that existed in their place. And this is like when you have city leaders who are like, why would
I spend my time doing that?
Yeah, why would I work with an artist? Well, when you can show that if what you are looking to do is engage more people, we're all talking about like, how do we get more people involved? And it's like, this is the job of artists and of social practice artists specifically. So one community that participated in that, they all have different success stories, but I'm going to focus on this town called Tracy, Minnesota. They partnered with the library system, and they did some work around welcoming and belonging with an artist who did a whole series of really incredible work bringing together the different cultures in their community, and they saw really transformative change in terms of who is participating in different city initiatives over a very short time period. So much so that right after that program, the city said, this is so impactful, we are going to write in our city budget an annual line for civic arts.
That's great.
And we're going so that, and it's not just like placemaking, beautification, murals, all really awesome stuff as well. They already had like a public art bucket. We're talking about having the city work with artists to address a challenge in their community. There is now an ongoing line item for that in a town of 1,200 people in western Minnesota. So if we can do that there in a pretty conservative town, and they're able to see like, wow, this is actually work. This did something that we didn't like have the time to do. We didn't have necessarily like, we're really busy on a part-time staff trying to run a city. Mm-hmm. We don't have time for this kind of deep engagement. Mm-hmm. But guess what? You have this incredible untapped asset and resource of cultural workers in your community.
Right.
See them as that. See them as an asset. Invite them to the table, and then let's flip it together.
Yeah, I like that.
Because we're on the Flipping the Table
Yes.
podcast.
Yeah. Throw it in.
Right on. Wow. That's good. Well, we look forward to continuing these conversations about really stimulating relationship building between urban and rural communities, because in the end, I love that idea of, I think you brought up, we're not urban and rural, we're Kentucky.
Yeah.
We're not urban and rural, we're America. I mean, we are one nation.
Civic body.
One civic body.
Yes. Whether we
we've
like it or not, my friends.
We've forgotten that.
Yes.
And we're kind of caught up in the differences, and there is a lot of common ground. So we're going to lean on you two to help people find that common ground. So thanks very much.
Best. Thank you so much for having us. And thank you for these types of conversations that you do to illuminate folks doing this hard work. It's really important. So thanks for being a voice and a platform.
Yeah, and Michael and Tay, I'm all here for the follow-up conversations. I'm very excited to be in action and to be part of the kitchen cabinet and what you're doing.
And let's
with
make sure
folks.
there's artists on that kitchen cabinet.
Yeah,
eh?
I know. We thought about it. I mean, I've been thinking about that. That would really be good to figure out how to bring the arts in. So,
we're going to.
Yeah, good. Good. All right. And all right. Take care. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed the show, hosted by Roots of Change, a program of the Public Health Institute, a nonprofit organization dedicated to building a healthier world.